Hello, everyone. I'm Angelina Mojica, sending you good vibes. This is your Good Morning Minute. I have Amanda Todd with me today, and she is going to talk about rising from the ashes, how one woman overcame adversity to achieve success. Hi, Amanda. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And
Yeah,
I want to just jump right into it. That's me. I'm like, let's get
absolutely.
going. Um,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am Amanda Todd, and I work at a local nonprofit here where I work with foster children. I actually have five kids of my own. I adopted two out of foster care, and three are my biological children. And I'm actually in pursuit of my master's degree. So I'm just trying to make a difference, just like you. So.
Oh, well, thank you so much. A lot of things on your plate, it sounds like, and I definitely can understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, busy mom life, but we get it done, don't we?
We sure do. We're determined. So
Yeah.
let me just break it down, this topic a little bit for
Okay.
our listeners. So rising from the ashes is usually a metaphor that we often associate with that mythological phoenix, a bird that is reborn from its ashes,
Yeah.
and being also transformed and so much more powerful, coming out of that, like just that pile of ash.
Yeah.
And so what I want everyone to know is like you're going to share that part of you, but you're also going to share like the story that the challenges that you encountered and the difficulties, but how and really with focus on how you were able to overcome them and
Yeah.
ultimately find your stride in your life journey and find that success. So if
Yeah,
you want to
absolutely.
share a little bit of your story.
So I was actually a teen mom. I was in high school, my senior year of high school. I was dating a high school sweetheart, and I found out I was pregnant like a month to 2 months before I graduated. So of course, like, all of that, the emotions go into like, I'm only a child, and how am I going to raise a child myself? And so I went through all of the emotions of like, do I keep it? As at that time, I didn't know what it was. Do I keep it? Do I not? And, I'm very pro-life. And my mom actually passed away when I was 12. And my dad kind of just, I went in and I sat down with him and I was like, this is where I'm at. And, he just looked at me in the eyes and said, okay, what do we need to do? And he never judged me. He never made me feel inferior, but I said, I don't know if I should keep it or not. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, I will tell you this. Your mom prayed every day for you. And she was told, at pregnancy with you that it was better to abort you than to keep you. And due to medical issues. And she just couldn't, like the fact of I will die carrying my child before I let her go. And in that moment, I knew, like, not that I had ever thought about abortion, but in that moment, I was like, yeah, I can't even think about that. So, God has brought this child to me, and I'm going to figure out what to do. And so now, looking back, that single motherhood was hard. Had a lot of things up and down, and things that I learned about myself that I didn't really want to, but um, I now have a 16-year-old and he is thriving and he is fun and witty and a mess, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I look at him every day and I'm like, I'm just thankful for God and for him.
That is amazing. And from one teen mother to another, I was first pregnant at the age of 19, so I totally understand. And I mean, you can be so pro-life or whatever, but in those moments of
Mhm.
crisis, right? In those
Yeah,
moments
yeah,
of situations, you do find yourself kind of teeter-totter on your choices and things like
yeah,
that. And it's amazing because not very many people, it's easy to sit on the other side and go, I would never do that or I wouldn't do that, but you really don't know until you walk into the shoes of
absolutely.
another, right? Um,
Absolutely. And
and
I
I
had
know,
never even thought about that, but when you're
yeah.
in fear and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Things
Mhm.
cross your mind that you never would have imagined,
Mhm.
especially when you're doing it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so what were some of the challenges like for your daily, just your daily life, and your own mental health?
Yeah, so I would say I have gone through single parenthood, more than once. I was married to his dad, for about 8 months, and then the marriage I just got out of, I was married to my children's dad for 12 years. And so you go through the hardships of, coming out and finding your partner and then blending a family to having your own and then going through divorce again. And here you are with being a single mom, and it looks way different than it did 16 years ago because culturally and financially and all of these things, it's just different. So I had to learn how to be on my own again. I had to learn, my dad was there and now he's not, and so doing that all alone, working full time and having more than one child, I had to really, really dig deep and find who my people were and rely on God like I had never relied on him before. You think you have this beautiful relationship and then you realize, um, no, it's growing and it's even better now than it was before. So, um, and I don't know, the obstacles or challenges don't ever end, like one hurdle to the next. And um, it's just one of those things you take it one day at a time and say, okay, I'm not like Matthew 5 or 5:26 talks about, I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. I'm going to worry about today because tomorrow's enough problems of itself. That's kind
Yeah.
of the mentality I have to have.
Yeah, and okay, so I like to really listen in and stuff because I do believe that, I mean, challenges are just never ending, and um they're not prejudiced. Like they'll hit anybody at any time, whether you are
Absolutely.
planning for it or not, it's coming. And so they're
Absolutely.
inevitable in that perspective. But you really have a strong faith. So I hear it, I hear it in your own TikToks and things like that. Um, so being a single mother and having two divorces behind you, what was that like in your faith walk? Because I know sometimes the church is not kind to those things. And in my experience, because I come from a very Christian foundation as well, I'm a believer, but in my experience, in those types of situations where we're kind of looked down as far as pitied in a sense, like, oh, poor you, you're a single mother,
Yeah.
you're going through all of this.
Yeah.
And so we are often overlooked in regards to leadership or even to be like a pillar in that church
Absolutely.
community. Um, what was that like for you?
Like I love that you talk about that because number one, being a woman and being a leader within the church is depending on your, religious and your faith-based will depend on what your entitlement or ownership in that church is. Because as women, we are, biblically, in certain people's eyes, we're underneath them. And so to number one, be single, number two, to have a failed marriage because not many people believe in divorce, and then to have, children out of wedlock, you have all these obstacles in your way. And it it really it really puts a damper on your heart if you don't know who you are in Christ. Um, First time around, I really, really struggled with my relationship with God because I had grown up in such a pivotal, like church for me. And I remember them looking at me and they are just like, they didn't know me anymore. I was 18 and I'd already, been married and divorced and had a child. And, I didn't fit in their pyramid or their box anymore. And what they didn't realize is like we forgot we are the church. And it takes many different stories and aspects for people to understand, hey, like, it doesn't matter where you come from. You're loved just the same as they are. And God gives us each and every step and story in our life because it's going to build you, it's going to build somebody else. And then looking at that as foster parents, like I remember, walking into church and I've got 6 different kids, all different colors, and I'm this white woman and they're looking at me like, Some of them are like, hey, how can I help you? And others, they don't know what to do. And
Mhm.
culturally, we should know now as a culture, it doesn't matter what color they are, they're children. But the looks and the comments, or just the way that they would put you in a certain position of like, how can I help you? How can I do this for you? Instead of pitying me, looking at these children and saying, wow, look at where you were, look at where you are, what you're going to
Mhm.
do, and so I think they just kind of dismiss that of like, I'm going to focus all of my attention on this one because, they obviously need it versus why don't we all like look at what can we do in our community? Who can I
Mhm.
help?
Mhm.
And sometimes that pushes people from church, because you just don't fit in their box and you don't fit in the normal husband and wife, family orientated type scenario. To even now, like I found a church and I'm loving it. And I walk in there and they can run through that whole church and nobody cares. They're happy that they're there. And they want us to help, they want me to get plugged in. What women can we serve? They want input and they care. And I think those churches really do exist, but they're harder to find.
I agree. I very much agree with that. And so here you are, you're battling these societal norms that,
Yeah. Yeah.
we are supposed, as women, are supposed to step into. And then there's stereotypes of being a single mother, and especially a single mother of, like you said, you had a rainbow of children.
Multiple. Yes, I
And
did.
so, and it's, and not really understanding, like true judgment just coming across from reading a book by its cover, right? Not really truly taking it off the shelf and getting
Absolutely.
to open it up and really see what it's about. Um,
Yeah.
so where did you find your strengths and motivation to rise above these difficulties?
Um, I found it in my kids' eyes. I mean, at the end of the day, I had God and he wasn't going anywhere. But sometimes you have to find him and pull, like really listen and pull his voice out. But other times it's just your kids are just looking at you like they see the whole world in your face and you can feel like an epic failure, but they still love you and they look up to you the way that a child would. They're innocent. And it kept me going. I had people depending on me, and realizing I can laugh about some of this. Instead of taking it to heart, I can laugh about some of this. Like, I mean, I've had people ask me, are they all the same father? And I kind of look at them and, I'm like, no, I've got four different baby daddies and, all these other things and the looks that they'll give you and they have no
Mhm.
idea they're adopted or they're not. And it's just funny because honestly, I got to a point where I don't have to give them a reason. I don't have to explain myself because God already knows and the people that he gave me already know. So I guess how I would say I overcoming those obstacles is remembering who I am and finding those people because we can look for ourselves in society and in the world, but you're never going to find the true you. You're only going to find the true you in God and those children and the people that love you.
I love that you mentioned your support system because
Mhm. That's so
in
important.
the, yeah, it is. And in the midst of, just my own, I call it my own rock bottom, where I decided to do that pivot of let's rearrange my life. Uh,
Yeah.
my children were the main factors. Like, of course, there's my belief system, the belief in and faith that I have, but also my children, because, and I know that you know what I'm talking about because we both work in
Yeah.
the child welfare sector of things,
Yeah.
but it's a choice that you make as a mother, because you can do this or you can do that, and those consequences, there's consequences either way, but it's a choice as a mother. And I think to truly understand that, children become a support system, even though they aren't maybe,
Yeah.
the ones that, like a mentor or somebody who would be like, Amanda, yes, you can do this, you got it,
Yeah.
girl, you look where you're
Yeah.
coming from. It's just that they believe in you
Mhm.
unconditionally. It's that unconditional
Unconditional.
belief. Were there
Mhm.
any, so you mentioned people too outside of your children, were there any
Mhm.
like mentors or role models that you kind of looked up to or confided in, or what
Yeah.
was that support system? Like kind of detail that out a little bit.
Yeah. I would say I had two different factors. I had leaving a marriage that was, volatile and very hard,
Mhm.
where I needed a different kind of framework and support system versus single motherhood because, those two things are complex and not always can we mix them together. And so I kind of had to put my feelings to the side and get counseling. I had to reach out and say, you know what, like I am a strong, independent woman, but right now I'm not. And walking through that door was probably the hardest thing because I had to be vulnerable and I had to say I don't have it figured out and I made these mistakes or I didn't. Um, and then I just had to honestly, sometimes I did it a lot alone, because when you start looking for someone to pick you up and lead you, you have to honestly look at their life as well. And what leadership do they have? And I didn't want my story, their story, to just be in anyone's hands. I needed it to be safe and secure. And until I could trust my judgment and trust someone else, I had to just really rely on counseling, Jesus, and my family. And when I did find my crew, some of them were actually younger than I was.
Mhm.
Um, One of them is like a best friend to me, and I'm having a meltdown. She doesn't have any kids, and she'd drop everything and come over, and she's helping me clean up sickness and helping me put kids to bed and bathing them and making dinner. And I'm in awe of her because I'm just like, who would do that?
Mhm.
You know? And then I find foster parents that I work with. Um, they just took me under their wing, one set of family, and they're like, okay, I am gonna mother you and mentor you. And I didn't even have to ask. So um it's just crazy how God works. He puts the right people in your life, right time.
And I am glad that you mentioned that because that's exactly where my thought process was heading as I hear your story is
Yeah.
as you start making intentional strides towards your
Mhm.
goals, the
Yeah.
opportunities or the doors are open, and those people that are vital to your growth, to your success, are put intentionally in place so that
Mhm.
whether that be for a season or for a lifetime, and they help you
Yeah.
along that journey. And it is so important to have something like that, I think. And but here's the thing that you mentioned. You said, but at the end of the day, it had to be me, right? Because
Mhm.
we have self-talk, and that inner dialogue that we're talking to ourselves, sometimes it reverts back to the old programming as far as like, I
Yeah.
can't do this. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm just not worthy and all of these things.
Oh, absolutely.
So what systems or what things did you put in your healing journey?
Yeah.
Um, to help you at night when it is hard and I mean, it's just you in the dark. I know you have your prayers and maybe that's part of it, leaning on Christ there, but what else? Because I mean, those thoughts pop in, they pop out, you're driving down the road and it's boom,
Oh, yeah.
what else did you put in play for yourself?
Whew, that was hard because, I'll say that when you leave a relationship and it is a codependent relationship on top of maybe narcissism or maybe something of that nature, and you forget who you are and you're used to being belittled and you're used to being abused and treated this way, the last person that you think of trusting is yourself because you have been told you're crazy and you're worthless and you can't do it without me and all of these things. And so I know many, many women understand that because maybe they're there right now, like they know they probably should do something different, but to do it is like it's so scary. And that's why I say, like, at the end of the day, I had to do it. I had to put my big girl pants on and do it because I was healing. And through my healing, my children are going to heal through me. And I got to where every morning I would wake up and I'd have worship music on. And every night I would go to bed and I'd have worship music on. But in the middle of that, I had podcasts from other women in the church, like Lisa Turkish. She actually went through a divorce, and she's a woman of leadership in the church. And she kind of talked about like theology of it. So she brings her counselor in, and then she brings her son-in-law who's a theologist, and they all just break it down of like divorce is not a sin. And all of the lies that Satan tells us, and all of the lies that the world and community tells us, or society, they break it down point by point by point. And at the end of it, you've got chills and you're crying and you're thinking to God, like, okay, because when it hits you, and there's nobody that can break somebody like yourself, because you know yourself better than anybody else. And the negative self-talk and just the defeat alone, there's no grace. You can look at anybody and say, oh, you know what, you're doing better than you think. But to do it to yourself is just near impossible. So I I had to find those things, and I had to be honest with my counselor and say, hey, this is where I'm at, and I need some truth. And we would break that down, do EMDR, and we would do those hard therapy sessions that I needed for a long time. And I had to let sit in that. And sometimes that's the hardest part, is sitting in the quiet and remembering the good.
Ooh, ooh, that hits so deep, remembering the good. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's buried. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
you want to talk about a phoenix rising from ashes,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You have to remember
Yeah.
the good, so much so that it trumps all of the other things, like all the
Yeah.
ugly stuff, right? Because that's what we do when we go through life, starting from our childhood, is we build this identity based on our situations, based on our experiences, and it's a lot of internal dialogue. We
Yeah, it
make
is.
assumptions and build perspectives based on what we see, whether that's mom and dad fighting in the kitchen, or
Absolutely.
going through child trauma, whatever it is. We take that and we internalize it and make a belief about it and say, okay, well, I'm not worthy, and this is all I'm good for. And that's your foundation.
It is.
That is your foundation. So
It
what
is.
I hear you doing is you fed yourself constantly. And
Absolutely.
when I say feed, you are listening to the word, you are praising the word, I mean, morning, night, and in between.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
constant, because you're going into that subconscious, you're breaking up that foundation and you're rebuilding.
Yeah.
You're rebuilding what you know is true now,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can elevate. So what was it in your journey here? What was it that was that pivotal moment that, okay, I need to make a change?
Yeah. So I was married for 12 years, and um I, being a single mom and doing all of those things and making those mistakes, from arrests, being younger, to like, just extreme depression and anxiety. You don't take the time to heal, hurt people hurt people. And
Mhm.
so you move in from one relationship to another, and you didn't give yourself any time in the middle. And so when I got married, what I thought was one person and what he thought was one person, we slowly changed and we adapted to the person that we were meant to be or not. And I remember just sitting there and you know, hearing the words that he had spoken to me, and I looking in my children's eyes, and I'm like, it hit me. They are learning from me. And if nobody understands generational curses, I really, really challenge you to look into it biblically and spiritually. And because systemically, in the world that we work in, if you don't have support and if you don't have healing, your trauma becomes their trauma. And so for me, leaving that abusive relationship was the hardest thing in the world, because my children love their father and he loves them. But at the end of the day, it's God, your marriage, and then your children. And I I had gone through many times where I'm like, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And you play it off. And then you have that moment where it's getting better because you're like, it's cyclic. So the highs are high and the lows are lows. But it was a moment that I really realized I am worth way more than this. Like, they are worth way more than this. And he is worth way more than this. And he's not going to get the help he needs until he has to. And I made that choice of, it doesn't matter how hard this is going to be. I'm going to look back and I'm going to grow and I'm going to learn myself, and I'm never ever going to let another man put his hands on me, because I want my daughter to look at me and say, when a man loves you, he loves you and he doesn't do these things. And when that man, my son, looks at him, I want him to honor his wife and know how to speak to her. And that was probably the moment I realized how much impact that I had at the tips of my hand. Like I had to make a decision for them and I had to make one for me. And it was hard. It was really hard.
And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that, because
Yeah.
the truth is it is hard. It's easier said than done. Like that cliche does not come from nowhere, because
No,
it is so easy for me to sit there and go, well, all you got to do is get out of the relationship.
exactly.
And
I
as
don't know how many
true,
times I've heard that.
right, right. And as true as that is, it's the hardest thing, because there's so much that you have to go through mentally, and just again addressing your
Yeah.
inner self, right? Um, in order to get out of that. I know for myself, because I very much fell into the statistical norms there. It took
Yeah.
me 7 tries to get out of my domestic violent relationship. And at that point I was like, I'm a statistic now. Like, I need to
Yeah.
make a change,
Yeah.
because, and like yourself, looking at those children and going, this is what they're equating love to. This is what they're equating relationship to. And
Yeah.
I can't be responsible for that. Like, I've got to
No.
make the change.
No.
So I hear you. I hear you saying that.
Yeah.
Um, what are some of the lessons that you learned through all of this in overcoming
Yeah.
adversity?
You know, touching back on what you had said about statistics, like that was hard for me because I had left 2 times before. And this was my, third time. And
Mhm.
statistically, a woman who is in a domestic relationship or violent situation takes them 9 times to get out. And through that, she often goes back because if you're in a domestic violence with narcissism, if you're in it with, mental health issues, your judgment of yourself and your persona and your thinking is no longer there. Because you are in fight or flight mode, you are in survival mode, and you're in fear, like absolutely fear. Like, if I leave, he's going to come find me. It's what women go through. And for me, I didn't really have that because I knew I could put that barrier down or that boundary down, saying I'm nope. Um, but it took me getting court orders. It took me um having a boundary and saying no, like, because that's the biggest thing for women is they come back and they tell you everything that you want to hear. And it's so much better now. And I would never do that to you. And they get stuck in the what could have been and what should have been, that it clouds their judgment. And then you see women who have, actually passed away from times like this, or never leave. And so when I hear someone tell me, why didn't you just leave? It's so offensive because women don't have that choice as easy as it sounds, because you are molded and shaped to your abuse. And you don't think you have options because you're in constant cleanup mode.
Mhm,
I've got to
mhm,
keep this way, because if not, this will happen. Um, and you lose who you are, you lose the truth. And so that's something that I had to overcome as well. And so I would say with, I think your question was just touching base on what have I learned?
Mhm.
I learned my value. I learned that I am way stronger than I ever thought I was. I learned, I am learning, I have love to give and I have love to receive. And it's okay to wait. It's okay to get out there and meet people and have fun. But never, 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 ever forget who you are. Because when you do, you've given them power, not you. And I've learned people truly care. That there's not always someone out there with an ulterior motive to hurt you. Um, I've had to battle the lies of trauma. I'm never going to be healed. I'm never going to find anybody who's going to want somebody with 5 kids.
Mhm.
And I've just learned it's just a tactic, like the enemy will use anything and everything that we say out loud because he can't hear our thoughts. But we voice it out loud as a concern or a worry. Well, that just gives him full reign to run in and take hold of that. And before you know it, you're back to being insecure and
Mhm.
fearful. So I had to stop saying it out loud. And when I had those feelings, yeah, nope. I stand right here with the blood of Jesus and you be gone, Satan. And you have to call him out.
Mhm. And you're so right. It is having to go back and saying, you know what? These are the lies. This is who I used to believe I was. And
Yeah.
that was the life that I created, but now this is who I am. So I mean, and it's a
Absolutely.
constant reminding of no, I'm not going to allow myself to go back into that. And it is comfortable. We love comfort zones as human beings. We love the comfort, but stepping out and saying, no, I'm worth more is a big challenge. And that's why it's so hard to leave, because the embedded lies that
Mhm.
we're having to constantly battle as, people stepping out of those types of situations.
Yeah. And we all, as women, we want a plan.
We do. And
And
then it's
can't always
easy.
have a plan.
Right. And it's easy for us to build identities around motherhood, around
Oh,
being a wife, and lose the independent person that we brought
yeah.
into this relationship. And that's a whole nother topic that I could go
It
on.
really
But,
is. It
but
really is.
as we wrap up, Amanda, what are some maybe takeaways or advice you could give others that may be in a similar situation, that may be looking for a way out?
Yeah. Um, I would say if we all know it down deep in our heart, and
Mhm.
our gut is always right. And then if you listen to your soul and this is not right, then you need to do something. And you're not failing him. You're not betraying him because anytime that someone lays their hands on you, they are betraying you. And you have to remember that. You have to remember I was a person before I was married, before I had children, and I'm going to be a person when they're gone because eventually you're going to be on your own. And I would say plan. If you are in a situation that you don't plan or you can't plan, then you need to get help. There are, hotlines for domestic women violence that you can call anonymously. There are
Mhm.
shelters here in this area that we're located in, but actually they're everywhere. Another thing is support groups. Like maybe you're not at that point where you can leave, but I have been going to a support group for the last couple months and um, addressing that and just going into that made me realize I had shame. I had so much shame of like I was better. I should have
Mhm.
known better. But I had all these women that were around me that supported me and loved me and they spoke the same truth.
Mhm.
And so um that was like monumental for me. But the other part was I really had to plan. Um, don't be like I was and think more about him. Think about the future. So report. If something happens, make a report. You're going to need that trail because court's going to come up and you don't want to be the woman that's sitting in the courtroom with no evidence, nothing to stand by or fall back on. And if you can't make a report, then take pictures. Email them to yourself. Build a book and you can put it under your bed, under your pillow, like somewhere that it's inconspicuous, that no one knows. But write down on this day, at this time, this happened. Take pictures. Email them to you. Don't keep them on your phone, because if you were in a relationship like most women are, they're going to go through your phone. They're going to look at it and see what is she up to? Who is she talking to? And you don't want anything else to make it worse at that point. So I would say the best thing to do when you're trying to get out of that is, one, remember who you are. Remember you're fighting for them and your children and for yourself. You need to get help. You need to call a hotline. You need to reach out to a local support group. Find a woman that you trust. Make a plan. And don't let anybody else know that plan, but that person that you have, and not an intimate partner, because that will just make it worse. Have a trusted person that knows that plan, and remember that you can do this. Like, remember at the end of the day, you're going to look back in 5 years, 5 months, and you're going to be so proud of yourself because you did it and you got out, and it's not going to hurt as bad. But you have to remember, when you leave, you think the leaving part is the hardest part. When you leave, the hardest part is staying away and working on yourself. And
Yeah.
that alone, it's not over.
Yeah. And that's when the healing starts and the
Exactly.
journey. So you definitely need to heal before you can elevate and before you can rebuild. So Amanda, tell us a little bit about where we can find you if we're
Yeah.
wanting to reach out to you, maybe even some things that you're working on that you'd like to promote. Let us know a
Okay.
little bit of that.
Yeah, so I'm in pursuit of my master's degree, and my goal is to work with women who have been either in domestic violence situations and or women who have had their children removed, because 99% of the time they went through something as a child that pursued or that prompted their current situation right now. And so I am on social media. It's actually Amanda Lee now, so I changed it back to my maiden name.
Okay.
I have TikTok. I talk about a lot of hard things on TikTok. I make funny videos. You got to have the fun stuff in there. So I I enjoy really just kicking back, but I have so many women that reach out to me and they ask me questions. How did you do it? What did you do? How do you keep going? And so I'm always up for that. You can message me on there. You can message me on Facebook, on TikTok, and I'm honestly thinking that there needs to actually be maybe some more support groups or just a village of people. And so I would love to, like on a Saturday morning or something of that nature, because we all have kids, meet at the park, meet at somewhere that we can all, cost effectively or friendly can meet together, and moms do momhood and kids do kidhood, and we all grow together and we have a family outside of a family. And so when I get that up and running, I'll share it with you. But yeah, just don't ever be afraid to reach out, because
Awesome.
I'm here.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. And everyone, I'm Angelina Mojica, your life coach, sending you much love, much peace, many blessings.